Okay, so it's time to deep dive into crazy theory territory. And you, great theory mongers, you chefs of the great Final Fantasy theoretical palette, you guys are going to love this. Or love to argue with it. Either way, it leads to great discussion and analysis, which you know I love and enjoy. So we know that in Final Fantasy XVI, there's a number of crystals scattered across the realm of Valisthea. Whether this is the whole world or just an area, who knows, but this continent seems to hold all the crystals within the story, all the ones that matter. So these crystals spew out something called ether, which gives people who tap into it power, and also gives chosen humans, who are called dominants, the power to call icons. We know all this, we saw it from the website, we saw it in the trailer. But where do these crystals come from? Well, looking at the different kingdoms of the land and their religious beliefs, the Crystalline Orthodox for example, or the very religious Holy Empire of Zembrek and so on, I think it's safe to say a good proportion of the local populace seem to put the crystals down as coming from the god or deity of the land, or being the god or actual deity of the land itself. So the crystals being a divine ruler within their own right. So what sort of deity are we talking about? Well, this is where it starts to get really interesting. See, take a look at the names of each of the crystals. We have Drake's breath, Drake's spine, Drake's head, Drake's fang, and Drake's tail. They all have Drake in them. And as we know, Drake is another term for a dragon, or shortened term for dragon. So the crystals seem to be implied to either represent a part of a dragon, or be a part of a dragon that has been broken into pieces. So, is this dragon then their god? Potentially. After all, we're no stranger to this. Just look at Final Fantasy XV. Bahamut, the dragon astral, was the supreme god, for want of another word, who called the shots of that world. Even in the highly underrated world of Final Fantasy, another fairly recent game, the Bahamuts are high-ranking supreme beings who, face off with the god of that world, Alexander being the god of the world and Bahamuts being in opposition to them. So it would go hand in hand with that idea. And by the way, as a side note, apparently underneath the mask of Final Fantasy XV's Bahamut, he actually looked very much like Noctis. And considering that many dominants in Final Fantasy XVI are considered as either automatic rulers like Joshua, or leaders of their nations such as the one in Dhalmekia, I wonder if there is a sort of deity walking among us sort of idea happening here. There's also another possibility. We know that Final Fantasy loves taking influence from Christianity and Judaism. Lots of people have made videos about this, Final Fantasy VII being a major example. Look it up if you haven't already. There's lots going on with Sephiroth and Cloud and their positions. But this also provides another possible answer for the dragon theory, which is that there's an idea of a deity defeating and casting its enemy and their armies out of heaven to the planet below, and binding them there where they can influence the humans living there, or where they do influence the humans living there. And that would bear great similarity to stuff that we see in the Bible book of Revelation, which would be right down Final Fantasy's alley. Now, this works well on a number of accounts. The influence of that cast down dragon would be the ether that gives humans powers, and the ability to summon icons who could be considered members of the dragon's army. It also then makes a bit more sense why some people would believe the crystals and dominance to be cursed and a bad thing, sort of like we see in the Iron Kingdom. Those people who viewed the dominance in this way could essentially be the people who have unearthed the truth to what the crystals really are. And it would also lend itself to the possibility that this dragon, who is no doubt Bahamut, will eventually reform its parts. And make no mistake, I do believe there are more than 5 crystals out there. There are dark parts of the map which have nothing there. So I do think we'll find more. So there's a chance that these parts might all be reformed to make that full dragon enemy. And once we form in, I think we'll see that that dragon, who I believe to be Bahamut, whether deity or as a deity's enemy, turns out to be our final boss, our final enemy, the big bad guy. And slaying deities is basically what Final Fantasy does. They're a big fan of destroying higher powers to stamp down human rule. We saw it with Final Fantasy VII, especially in the remake, a little bit in Final Fantasy IX. We also saw it in Final Fantasy X with Yu Yevon. We saw it in 12 with the Akuria, and we saw it in 13. I mean, just look at what they did to poor Brunavelza. But we did fail to do it in Final Fantasy XV, the last entry in the series. Although, if you do consider that book that was written afterwards to finish off the universe, it did end with Bahamut getting, well, ganged up on and beaten to a pulp by the cast and the other Astrals. I haven't read it myself, but I do hear that Noctis hits him so hard that his mask comes off. So that's it. My big theory regarding the crystals, Bahamut, and where this story could end up taking us. So let me know down in the comments below, what's your opinion on this? Do you think I'm talking complete nonsense, or do you think there could be some semblance of sense in there? Of course, these are still very early days, and there's lots of information to come out, especially in 2021, which we've been promised by the directors and producers. Also, don't forget to subscribe for more Final Fantasy theory and analysis videos, as well as art tutorials, education news, and more. If you haven't already, check out these videos appearing on screen right now. I'm sure that you'll find them super interesting. And that's all for now. Until next time.